Thank you, Lucinda, and save a little bit of that special juice for me when I come over. Anyway, great to have you on the program, and we're going to be turning our attention now to more special juices.
Yes.
We're joined by Amy Stewart, who is the author of many books. Welcome back, I should first say, to Central Texas Gardener.
It's always good to be back in Austin.
And we love having you. And your new project, The Drunken Botanist.
Yes.
And it's loaded with lots of information about plants and the ways that we imbibe them.
That's right. Yes.
What led to this project?
Like many great ideas, it was born in a bar. You may be surprised to learn.
Not too surprising given the subject matter.
Right. Yeah, I just got into a conversation about gin and all the plants that go into gin. And pretty soon I was looking at everything behind the bar saying, you know, there's barley, there's corn, there's sugarcane, there's agave.
Right.
Everything in every one of these bottles is a plant. I mean, which is kind of fascinating when you think about it.
Well, you know, it is fascinating, but it shouldn't be too surprising because, after all, we lived close to nature for hundreds of thousands of years.
That's true. That's true.
And we've been drinking all that time, I think.
We have. I interviewed an archaeologist who analyzes the residue on pottery shards to see what people were drinking 10,000 years ago, and then recreates those so you can sip them.
Right, mead.
Find out. Right, yeah, exactly.
Lots of mead.
Right.
Well, let's just dive in and start talking
Okay.
about some of these fascinating relationships between the plants and the drinks. There are a lot of very common plants, agriculturally common plants, like barley, that are certainly used. I understand that barley has a particularly rich history when it comes to its relationship with alcoholic beverages.
Interestingly, yes. So the way we make grains into alcohol in the first place is that we take the starch in the grain. So a grain's just a seed, right? That's all it is. But the plant puts all this starch in there so that when the grain falls to the ground and gets wet, there are these enzymes inside the grain that bust the starch into sugar so that the little baby plant has something to eat before it can make its own food. Well, it turns out that barley is uniquely good at that process of breaking starch into sugar. So you get barley wet and it starts to germinate. The brewers call this malting. So that's what malted barley is, are little seeds that are just starting to sprout. And if you put a little bit of barley in with corn or wheat or rye or any other grain, those enzymes will leave the barley and go to work on the corn and the wheat and everything else. So a little bit of barley ends up in a lot of different drinks because it's so good at releasing the sugar.
Fascinating.
Yes, exactly.
So it plays a role in many alcoholic beverages.
It does, but in Scotch in particular, barley has this interesting role. So they get it wet, it starts to put out little roots and little green shoots, and then they have to stop that process, or they'll end up with a room full of plants instead of whiskey. So how do you stop it? You dry it out. What do you dry it out with? Well, in Scotland, they would make a fire out of peat logs. They'd go out and cut some peat from the peat bog, because that's all they had to make fire with. And that's where that smoky flavor in Scotch comes from. It's from the smoke that has to go through to stop the germination process so you don't end up with these big plants that, you know, you can't make whiskey out of.
Well, fascinating. So it's dependent on peat, one of the humblest of all plants, and barley.
And today the Scotch industry is more refined, and so they use the smallest amount of peat they need, and they put it through pipes so that they use as little of it as possible to get that flavor.
Yeah, there's only so much peat in Scotland after all.
There's only so much peat, and they use very little of it, but get a lot of flavor.
Okay, well, I think that's fascinating. Now, another very common plant, the one that every American is familiar with, corn.
Right.
Has an interesting relationship to alcohol as well, and an ancient one.
Right, well, so here's the thing with corn. It's a New World plant, and native people in South America have been making booze with it for thousands and thousands of years, but not from the ears. They were actually...
Not from the ears?
Not from the ears, from the sugar in the stalk. So they were growing it like sugarcane, which is another big grass. They're both grasses, right?
Right.
And they were cultivating it for the sugar in the stalk. And we know this because you can look at archaeological sites and see the remnants of people chewing little bits of the stalk just to get a source of sugar. And you can still find those little, they call them quids, little chewed up bits of stalk. But they made wine. They would press the sweet juice out of the stalk and make cornstalk wine.
Ferment the cornstalk. Fascinating.
Even the colonists did a little cornstalk wine before
Right.
they figured out, oh wait, we know a better way to do this. we come from
Mash.
Scotland and Ireland.
Right.
We know what to do with this grain.
And then they have since turned corn into something else altogether, right?
Right. Well, so, you know,
Not wine.
the great American spirit, bourbon, was
Right.
born.
Right.
It has to be 51% corn if you're going to call it bourbon. That's the law.
Okay.
So that's where our great American whiskey comes from.
Right.
And also even vodka. Tito's vodka, as an example. Great
Right.
Austin spirit.
Absolutely.
Is corn.
Conquering the nation.
Even some gins are based in corn.
Right.
So you see it a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Gin
yeah.
and corn.
Right. Who knew? Right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the book is divided into thirds. The first deals with the kind of subject we're talking about right now, which is the different things that go in that are turned into alcoholic beverages.
Right.
But the middle section deals with the things that are added to add
Yes.
distinctive flavoring. But many of these started as medicines, correct?
Right. The original reason we added plants to alcohol was to create medicine. There were no pills, so what you would do is you'd take plants and soak them in alcohol and extract the active ingredients, put it on the shelf, and give that to somebody when they were sick.
Sure.
So, for instance, the bark of the cinchona tree is very high in quinine, which is a malaria treatment.
Right.
Very important. Well, we also put it in tonic water, so there's your gin and tonic. And there's all kinds of bitter European herbal liqueurs that have a little bit of quinine in them.
Okay.
So you start out soaking it in alcohol, and then you think to yourself, you know, if I put a little sugar in this, my patients might actually drink it. And then it's a very short step from that to putting a little of your medicine into a cocktail, putting it into your brandy.
Grandpa's special medicine.
Right, right. So we're still drinking these very medicinal plants, but I have to warn you, do not let yourself think that your cocktail is a health drink.
Oh.
Just because, yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't work that way. The doses are much too small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, quinine is one.
Quinine, sure.
Some other plants, anise, or what we think of as kind of licorice flavored.
Right, right. Yeah, it gets used in all kinds of spirits. And I think it was originally, you know, put into alcohol as something to sort of settle the stomach. And so you go to Europe, and in France you could get a pastis, and in Greece you could get ouzo. Throughout many European countries you can get absinthe. You go to New Orleans.
Wait a minute, back up to absinthe here for a minute.
Yeah.
Isn't this dangerous stuff?
No, it's another one of these licorice flavored herbal, meant to be an after dinner drink that settles the stomach.
Okay.
Absinthe has wormwood in it, Artemisia absinthium,
Okay.
which at ridiculously high doses could cause seizures and other problems, but so could ordinary garden sage, and we don't shy away from putting sage in our Thanksgiving stuffing.
Okay.
So absolutely no reason to fear
All right.
wormwood, but absinthe happens to be very high in alcohol. So it's almost 80% alcohol usually, which is twice as much as gin or vodka.
Okay.
So people were getting alcohol poisoning is what was going on.
That would explain
You add a
some of the...
lot of
right.
water to absinthe
Right.
before you drink it.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to be, not many of us are going to be growing wormwood in our gardens.
It's a pretty plant. It's an Artemisia, Mediterranean
Artemisia's
herb,
yeah,
drought
okay.
tolerant.
Yeah, drought tolerant probably will take over the universe like
Yes.
most Artemisias.
Yes, exactly.
But we do want to just spend a little bit of time talking about the third part of the book, which has to do with plants we can use in our gardens.
Right.
And again, things that are used in the context of your book here of drinks.
Yeah.
Lavender. I'm trying to imagine a lavender drink.
Oh, you should have been with us a couple days ago when I was making lavender cocktails for everybody.
Okay, I
So
should have.
You should, you should have. So I think that lavender and some of these other floral herbs like the geraniums that maybe are smell like roses
Right.
are great in cocktails. You can do a simple syrup, just equal parts sugar and water, and you heat it up till the sugar melts and throw a bunch of lavender in, let it steep for an hour or two. That lavender flavor in gin, for instance, or in a vodka drink is really just bright and floral and interesting, and it tastes just like the plant smells, but in a really wonderful way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I love
like-
using floral stuff in cocktails.
Well, the thought of a summer cocktail with a lavender taste to it sounds really good to me.
Yeah, I make a lavender version of gin and tonic, so a fizzy gin drink that tastes like lavender.
Sounds
that is
great. Well,
yes.
again, our guest is Amy Stewart. The book is The Drunken Botanist.
Yes.
You're doing very well for a drunken botanist, right?
I'm remarkably sober, huh?
You're remarkably sober.
For you.
Thank
for
you. Thank you so much. And on behalf of all of our viewers, thanks so much for stopping back by.
Thank
It's
you.
a real pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks.
And coming up next, it's our friend Daphne.